Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's DJ Sketch, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to take a look at Control, developed by Remedy Studios, releasing in September of 2019. Here we have a third-person shooter with a focus on narrative-driven action and a healthy dose of the paranormal, with an X-Files and even at times Twin Peaks kind of vibe to it, which I can fully appreciate. This released in the same month as Borderlands 3, which makes sense as to why I completely overlooked it at first. Recently, I played Alan Wake for the first time, and I was floored with how awesome that game was. And a buddy of mine showed me some clips of Control, asking me had I ever played it before. And I completely forgot that this had came out, so I was pretty stoked on what I saw, so I figured let's check it out and see what's going on with it. So the story of Control goes a bit like this. You play as the leading protagonist, Jesse Faden, and it's her first day as the director at the Bureau of Control. Even at the start, things seem a bit off with your surroundings, and the story doesn't let on to much in the beginning, but once you meet your supporting cast of characters that will work amongst you in the executive sector, you slowly get more development as to who you're working with and what you're up against. As time goes on, you discover the ongoing conflict with the enemy of the game known as the Hiss, and at first it's unclear where they've come from, but they appear hostile and have a variety of supernatural abilities. Tasked with getting to the bottom of the origins of the Hiss, you'll play through the story's main 10 missions with a lot of optional side quests, which I highly recommend checking those out because those are the best parts of the game. Gameplay wise, the combat is pretty solid. The service weapon is your evolving gun of choice through the game and has 5 upgrades changing its firing type. The Scatter, which is your shotgun, Spin being the machine gun, Pierce staying true to the name can penetrate through surfaces, and the Charge is essentially a grenade launcher. The gunplay here feels pretty satisfying, especially once you've upgraded your weapons to the highest points, and a lot of your arsenal starts out pretty powerful at the base level, but once you've got them all gassed up, you can really start going out and doing some serious damage. On the journey, you'll also discover a lot of psychic abilities, and this is where the gameplay really shines. Once you get all of your abilities maxed out, the game takes a turn into where you start to feel extremely overpowered at times, but also at the same time Hiss will throw countering enemies at you that are at or above your skill level. Even early on you might find yourself getting smoked, but once you acquire more skills, the enemies will become a pushover after a little while, especially towards the end. And also the Psychic Throw and the Levitation Ground Pound were also like 2 of my favorite things to use in the game. Those are a lot of fun. That and chucking enemies at the other enemies too. That was also a pretty nice touch. And also sound wise, this is where the game has some really interesting stuff going on here. The Foley effects here were also some of my favorite aspects of the game in general. Weapons sound punchy, explosions sometimes deafening, and the ambient sounds add a really cool layer of confusion and sometimes dread in the corridors of the Bureau. This one I highly recommend playing either with surround sound or put on a pair of headphones. Also, not to spoil anything about the game, but the shout out to the band Mud towards the end of the game is fucking brilliant, and also one of the best things in the game. You'll know what I mean when you see it. Graphics wise, this game has some incredible moments. The environment itself starts out seemingly average, but upon exploring deeper into the facility, you're going to see some pretty wild stuff visually, and I mean that in a couple ways. The first being the environment's literally bending around you in all aspects, going from an average room to subtly a spinning corridor as if you're getting a first-person perspective of being a Tetronimo. Second being the varied use of color throughout the game. The facility will display a lot of very vividly colored areas and lighting effects that are sometimes like downright insane. Some to the point where you realize quickly that the epilepsy warning at the beginning is not an exaggeration. Also, particle effects here also look really, really good, and they are quite easy on the eyes. The character models, though, themselves are a bit of a mixed bag. At times they're going to look great, especially during the cutscenes, and some mocap effects that are really similar to L.A. Noire, so it looks very similar to that as far as like the character designs and animations themselves during the cutscenes. Other times you're going to see some broken animations and sometimes even janky looking models, but for the most part it looks decent. I'll tell you this, like, try to climb a ladder, and if you want to see the animation breaks, yeah, just try to climb anything. It's pretty hilarious. None of the things that weren't so great about Control. And I'll reiterate that I absolutely enjoyed playing through this, but one of my biggest gripes with the game was the map. The map at a glance seems like it should be just fine until you try using it and get lost trying to get to a waypoint. The color coding to denote the floor levels may seem unclear to some people at first, but aside from that, it just does not have an optimal design. And also there's points where the map just flat out breaks and doesn't work at all. And a lot of times with a problem that I ran into frequently is that the map just won't display. It'll have all the location names, but then no path to get to it. I don't mean the parts where they're blacked out, because that's supposed to happen, but there'll be parts where it's just hovering text and then no building to go around it. But after a while, like, you kind of get used to it, I guess. But also the thing is, with Control, exploration is paramount to this game. It's something that the game is heavily reliant on, and it would have been great if the map were just a little bit more useful. Better if it worked like it was supposed to majority of the time. But at the same time, like exploration is key in this game, so you're going to find a lot of areas on accident which are going to end up giving you a lot of loot, and you'll find a lot of materials and upgrades, mostly just because you stumbled upon it because the map failed you once again. My second gripe with Control was the checkpoint system. Once you cleanse a room, a control point will open up, which will work as a fast travel, but once a mission starts, most of which are quite lengthy, dying will send you back oftentimes all the way back to a control point that's farther away than where you were going or where you might have gone down at. The game again has a major focus on backtracking and exploration, but it gets extremely tedious when you have to traverse halfway, sometimes further, back to where you were just to get back to the progress that you were making during a mission. And to its credit, the checkpoint system, at least with the enemies, those stay dead, and all major events that you complete stay done. But even still, like, dying comes with a very heavy consequence that may have you doubling or sometimes even tripling back on ground you've already covered. However, my biggest complaint with the game was the ending. I'm not going to spoil any of it, but after everything this game did right, and even the parts that it got wrong, the ending was the decorative flamingo in the lawn to tie the whole package together. And it wasn't the worst thing I've ever experienced, but after the events that go down, you think the game would wrap up a little bit better than it does. But still, this is an interesting game to play through, and even though towards the middle of the game it gets a little heavy on the fetch quest, the ending though is something that may heavily disappoint people, but at least you can continue playing after the credit roll, and there's a little bit more side stuff to do, and also there's supposed to be DLC coming for this down the line if it's not out already. And another interesting thing is too, like with this game, is how the side missions are oftentimes way better than the main missions. About half the boss encounters on the main missions were kinda meh, but holy shit, dude, the boss fights on the side missions, pretty much all of them were fucking gas, dude. The former and the anchor are the first two that come to mind, and like those were two of the best parts of the game, and those are both side bosses. So in retrospect, it would have been dope had they made more of an emphasis on having those side mission bosses and encounters be more of like a main facet of the game than being just like a side quest, because overall, like, the side quests were just more fun and more interesting to play than the main quest. Even with the frustrations that came with some of them, I mean, there was honestly just some of the best parts of the game. Control, with everything that it gets right, is an absolutely thrilling and weird game to play through. And with all the callbacks to Max Payne and Alan Wake, which are awesome to see, where the game falters, it usually does, and it does it pretty hard. But thankfully, it's not to the point where it's unplayable. Control gets a 7.5 out of 10. It's highly enjoyable, but I'll say off rip, if you don't like games where backtracking is a top tier requirement, this might not be the game for you. But however, if you enjoy games that are a little bit left to center and have some stunning visuals, audio, and some really solid gunplay, I'd say check it out, man. You might find something worth taking a deep dive into. And I thank you again for checking out this video. If you find these helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. And check back often. I'll have some more reviews and commentaries coming out in the future. But until then, stay safe out there, and I'll see you on the next one.